So I do want to talk now about an announcement from the DC world earlier this week, and that's Walter Hamada has reportedly left Warner Brothers after 15 years at the company and 4 years as the head of DC Films. So let's take a step back, and can you walk us through what led to this announcement?
He was brought on after the Justice League got bad reviews and only made 659 million worldwide, which was a disappointing figure considering Batman v Superman made 873 and Man of Steel made 668. Also, thanks to reshoots and a director swap, in which Zack Snyder was politely asked to exit, and Joss Whedon was brought in to basically shoot whatever the studio wanted. And without getting too much into that discourse, I don't consider that film the Joss Whedon cut. I consider it the producer's cut, or the studio version of Justice League. And having seen the Snyder cut, it's a mix of slight reshoots and a very abridged Cliff Notes version of the 4-hour Zack Snyder version. I think if anything else, that the Joss Whedon version should be taught in film schools and how to cut a 4-hour film down to a coherent 2-hour one. Whether that should be done or not is a different question. Okay, Walter Hamada gets brought in to run DC Films in late 2017, early 2018. This is because he's had remarkable success alongside James Wan and other participants in turning the Conjuring universe into the first fully functioning post-Avengers cinematic universe. These are varied in scale and tone and budget. Conjuring 2 cost $40 million. Conjuring Annabelle cost $5 million. So there's a lot of wiggle room here. Mm-hmm. The films are standalone in that you don't have to have seen the previous ones to understand. They are, they're basically what everybody said they wanted out of DC films. Stop trying to be Marvel, be DC. So I would argue the DC films that Hamada made or was in charge of when they were opened, Aquaman, Shazam, Joker, Birds of Prey, the Batman, the Suicide Squad, Black Adam. They were varied. Did I say Birds of Prey already? Yeah, I think yes. I did. They were very varied in terms of budget. Mm-hmm. Joker cost 65, Shazam cost 90, Birds of Prey cost 85, while the Batman understandably cost 185. Aquaman cost 165. It looks like 400, but I digress. Every time I watch Aquaman, I'm shocked that the movie didn't cost $400 million and isn't 4 hours long. But whatever. That's James Wan for you.
Is that the best DC movie in recent history?
Yeah, and the films were relatively successful. They got good reviews. Shazam got like a 90% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and I would argue it's the best DC films it's the best film of the quote unquote post, from Man of Steel to now DC film. Shazam, Aquaman made $1.1 billion with solid reviews and terrific legs, even by Christmas standards. Shazam made 360 on a 90 budget. I think it would have done better if it hadn't gotten kneecapped by Avengers Endgame, but you play in the deep end, sometimes you drown. Joker made $1 billion and was nominated for like 10 Oscars and won 2 of them. And contrary to popular belief online, it inspired, let's see, how many acts of mass violence or copycat crimes did it inspire? 0. There were 0 examples of in-movie theater violence or outside violence inspired by that film. So I don't know if you remember in September, October of 2019, but the internet was in a flurry thinking the film was going to be the next Natural Born Killers. All due respect, it was not, because contrary to popular belief, fictional violence does not inspire nonfiction violence.
So it sounds like Walter Hamada did a good job. So why
he did?
Why his exit?
Because COVID kneecapped everything. Absent COVID, here's what would have happened. Wonder Woman 84 would have opened in June of 2020 to decent reviews and solid box office. I don't think it was ever going to make $1 billion, and I don't think it might not have made as much as the first one, but 750 worldwide, that was feasible. The Batman would have opened to strong reviews and strong box office in June of 2021, which is exactly what happened. The Suicide Squad probably still would have bombed because a lot of people didn't like the first Suicide Squad, and you had an R-rated $180 million picture that did not have Will Smith, did not have the Joker, and did not have Batman. But it might have only made, 350, 400 worldwide. as opposed to the first Suicide Squad that made 725. Again, on a 180 budget, that would have been a miss, but it wouldn't have been a catastrophe. And following the successful runs of the Batman and of Wonder Woman 84 and the deluge of other successful DC films, it would have been sort of a moral victory. They got James Gunn away from Marvel after he was fired temporarily from Guardians of the Galaxy. They basically said, hey, look, we're a filmmaker-driven studio after all. We gave James Gunn $180 million to make an R-rated trauma film. And yeah, it bombed, but hey, for the love of the game. And most importantly, you wouldn't have gotten the Snyder Cut because HBO Max would not have been desperate for new product. So you would not have had that discourse returning to the front of the narrative with a retroactive David versus Goliath story that completely ignores how badly Batman v Superman was received, and how the same people now championing the Snyder Cut, a lot of them, were the same people in 2016 saying, oh my God, Batman v Superman is terrible. Suicide Squad is terrible. Something must be done. And I'll admit, I was one of those people, because I don't hate Batman v Superman, but it wasn't what you do to start a cinematic universe. And also the theatrical cut is almost incomprehensible because the studio took a 3-hour film and cut it to 2.5 hours and cut out a lot of the plot and Superman centric stuff so they could prop up Batman, which is the classic Warner Brothers mistake. Stop emphasizing Batman at the expense of everybody else. I digress.
So do you think that this is a mistake, or is this a
Yes.
way for explain why
Yes,
you think
I would have kept him on, because before COVID, he was doing exactly what was requested of him, Walter Hamada, and the films were getting decent reviews and good to great box office. Birds of Prey was a disappointment, and we can debate why. I argued back in 2018 it shouldn't have gotten an R rating, because you were turning off the very, the younger female audiences and younger male audiences too, I guess, that would want to see a Harley Quinn solo and her gal pals adventure. And the issue is, most female-centric movies of that nature, Atomic Blonde, Lucy, the Underworld films, the Resident Evil films, they're already R-rated. So, making Birds of Prey R-rated, which for the record made it a better movie. I love it. I think it's one of their best films. It made my 2020 list. I hope Kathy Yen makes a lot of other movies and does whatever the hell she wants. But commercially speaking, going with an R rating was a mistake, because it made it no different than many other R-rated girl gang action pictures. And when Bad Boys for Life overperformed a month later, it was, again, just another R-rated movie. That being said, absent COVID, that would have been a bump in the road, or look what we can do that Marvel can't success story alongside the Suicide Squad. And Aquaman 2 would have been a huge hit earlier. And Black Adam would not have been delayed. It had been opening in the summer to decent numbers, but everything went to hell, and that's where we are. And I genuinely believe that Walter Hamada did not get the support he needed from the ever shifting Warner Brothers ownership. First it was Jason Kilar at AT&T saying HBO Max at all costs, and now you have David Zaslav saying fuck HBO Max, and these movies that were greenlit and partially shot for HBO Max, which aren't big enough and good enough to go to theaters, we're going to freaking cancel them. And that was the final straw for Hamada. He said fuck this. He was a producer on Batgirl, and I have very complicated thoughts on that decision, but that certainly doesn't endear yourself to the next executive. And that's one big reason why they have yet to find a successor for DC films.
So is Zaslav trying to make DC the next Marvel?
Yes.
And is that
I
a
think
mistake?
It's a mistake.
Explain.
Well, they've been playing this game for 10 years. I mean, next year is the 10-year anniversary of Man of Steel. And because of shifting ownership and circumstances somewhat out of their control, they're no better or worse than they were 10 years ago, when they're like, gee, I hope Man of Steel launches a universe, or gee, I hope Batman v Superman launches a cinematic universe, and an interconnected universe, and gee, I hope Wonder Woman is the comeback we need, and then Justice League, and okay, Aquaman's the comeback we need. And then COVID happened. They're like, fuck. And we spent 2 years in limbo. And I think especially Wonder Woman 84, but also to a certain extent, the Suicide Squad was sort of sacrificed to the streaming gods. And now we're no better off than we were 10 years ago. The announcement of the big DC universe as we know it, where Ezra Miller was cast as the Flash, which was a great idea 8 years ago, before they started getting into trouble. Mm-hmm. When the initial plan was for a 2-part Justice League movie to follow Batman v Superman, there was going to be a Cyborg movie and a Green Lantern movie in 2020. And, obviously a lot of that has not come to pass. And we've gotten films that we were not expecting, like a Joker movie that I thought off the cuff was probably a pretty bad idea, but I was wrong. And it made $1 billion and it was pretty good.
So are they going to get back to the original plan now, do you think?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you think they're going to get back to that original plan?
Possibly, but not. I mean, when I say that, I say the original plan is having a more tightly connected cinematic universe that eventually builds to periodic event films. Yes, I think so. But does that mean I think that Zack Snyder is going to come back and take over the universe again? Absolutely not. The general audiences weren't crazy about those movies. Critics weren't crazy about those movies. The studio was not crazy about those movies. And Zack Snyder is perfectly happy at Netflix being treated well.
So who's going to take over now for Hamada, do you think?
I'll do it.
Well,
I mean,
aside
I'm available.
From you.
But no, I have no idea, because who would want that job?
Not me.
I mean, Walter Hamada is just one person, but he basically did the job. And not only did he get thrown under the bus by circumstances beyond his control, he got turned into the final boss villain for the Snyder cult, as somehow he was responsible for shit that happened before he showed up. I mean, all due respect, it's not his fault that Ray Fisher was treated like crap on the set of Justice League.
Yeah, that doesn't.
It's not his fault that Zack Snyder was tossed off Justice League and Joss Whedon came in to replace him. He was brought in after that because of what happened there.
And what do you think about the timing with his departure being announced right as Black Adam is being released?
Well, he unofficial, from what I was told, he said he'd stay on at least till Black Adam came out. So it was either leave before Black Adam, which looks bad, mm-hmm. or leave right after Black Adam, which doesn't look that much better, but tomato.
So regardless of the reviews of Black Adam, he was already out the door?
I'm sorry. Yes, he was gone. I think Batgirl was the final straw. I mean, he was allegedly getting death threats from, again, when I say Snyder fans, I don't hold Zack Snyder personally responsible for this stuff. He's just one human being trying to make movies. Every fandom has their lunatics. Every fandom has people that take this stuff way too seriously and tie it to an integral part of their personality. And that's one reason why, online discourse is so insane right now, is that not only does every fandom have these kind of fans, but every fandom has like a mini civil war going on in terms of what they think a given brand should be. You have Star Wars, you have people that think it should be more like The Last Jedi and Andor. You have other people that think it should be more nostalgia-ish, like The Force Awakens or The Rise of Skywalker. And whoever yells the loudest online is always going to be promoted to the front of the table. And DC is unfortunately in a very strange position, because even in the Snyder fandom, there's a certain weird civil war going on saying, should we support Black Adam because Henry Cavill Superman might be back, or do we not support it because it was part of the Walter Hamada regime? If it does badly, we probably won't get another Superman movie. But if it does well, or if it does badly, we won't get a Superman movie, and that's bad. And if it does badly, they're probably going to absolutely reboot the old gosh darn universe, and they really will undo the Snyderverse. But if it does well, then that validates the previous regime, and that's bad. If this sounds insane, it's because it is. And
does that type of discourse affect the box office that much?
No.
Not at all. Okay,
that's the frustrating thing.
It's just Twitter talking. Okay.
I mean, all the last 2-3 weeks of back and forth about whether Superman is or isn't in Black Adam and what that does or doesn't mean, the movie's still going to open to about what it would have opened when I argued it was going to open to 2 months ago, which is an upper level Dwayne Johnson star vehicle. The Dwayne Johnson star vehicles that don't have that much to offer other than him, or they're less of a known thing, Jumanji, Rampage, Jungle Cruise, they open to around $35 million. Mm-hmm. Jumanji opened over Christmas, so it's a little complicated. The ones that are Dwayne Johnson plus, Hudson Shaw, Jumanji, The Next Level, San Andreas, which was The Rock versus an earthquake. Those opened between $55 and $60 million. And my argument, and I could have been wrong, but I think I'm right now. It doesn't look like I am, where you have, Black Adam, which is a Dwayne Johnson star vehicle that's also a DC Comics movie. And while there's going to be some overlapping fandom, so I don't think you're going to get twice the business of just a DC film and just a Rock film, because again, they're both, I'm both. I like his movies, his good ones, and I like DC films. But you are going to get some people that don't care about DC but like The Rock. You're going to get some people that don't like The Rock but do like DC. But overall, it's going to play sort of like an added value element. What's interesting about Black Adam, and then I'll move on because I've been babbling incredibly, is that it's probably the first big budget Marvel DC comic book superhero movie where the star is a bigger deal than the character since Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider in 2007. And before that, probably
Blade.
Wesley Snipes' Blade, which of course Wesley Snipes was here and Blade was here.
Well, Scott Mendelson, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me.